So before we do that, a little bit about me. I am your presenter. I am Monica Howdy, and I am one of the client success managers here at Formative. And just a little background about me. I have some experience in K-12 and higher education. I'm a former dual immersion teacher. I taught Spanish at the elementary level. And I also have experience with online learning and intervention working with middle school and high school students. So a little bit before we get started, I have a colleague in the chat, Casey. If you have any questions as I move along with this content, feel free to put your questions in the chat and she will be able to answer that. We are recording the session here today, and the recording will be made available on our training center in about a week. And we're slated for 30 minutes, but I don't anticipate utilizing the entire block. That being said, I can stick around for Q&A at the end if anyone is interested. So our agenda items for today, we're going to cover first the difference between content blocks and sections and some of the use cases for each to differentiate between the two. We'll also dive a little bit into how we can incorporate social and emotional learning into our formatives to really save us time as teachers in getting that pulse of how students are feeling and what they're thinking. And then finally, we'll end with lesson delivery by using teacher pace mode, just very briefly kind of modeling what that experience is like. So that all being said, let's go ahead and dive right in. For that, I'm going to switch on over to my Formative dashboard. And that looks like this. Now, if you haven't logged on to Formative in some time, you'll notice that the look and feel is a little bit different. Formative recently got a UX kind of makeover. That being said, the functionalities are all the same, so no worries there. Now I'm going to jump right into creating new Formative in order to access these content blocks that we're going to first talk about. So that takes me to my edit screen, and I always like titling everything that I work on. So I'm going to go ahead and title this Level Up with Formative. And to access the content block, what you want to do is hit this bigger plus sign right here. And so that'll pull up the question bank that we have. And as you can see, we have all kinds of questions for intellectual inquiry to really, assess all kinds of content areas and all kinds of grade levels. And what you're seeing on the right are the question types, and what you see on the left are the content types that we have available. So content can be attached to a question to sort of optimize and enhance it. Anything can be kind of mixed and matched here. So what we're going to do today is talk about how to create a content block that essentially can take any of these elements: audio, embedding a website, images, text, videos, and whiteboards, and you can utilize that resource and then kind of tackle on any of these question types to that content itself, and it'll create a content block. So all of those questions are tied to that particular content. So we're going to talk about how to do that. And because this is a more advanced webinar, so to speak, we're going to do one of the more advanced content types. So we'll actually go ahead and look at embedding today. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click embed. And that'll pull up my content block that you're seeing here. And let's say that I want to embed something from GeoBra, or, you have a number of tools that you can utilize. You can incorporate websites on here. You can incorporate any manipulatives that are helpful and handy to you. But for my example, I'm going to pull from GeoBra. And for that, I have a link ready to go. So give me 1 second. I'll pop it up here so that you can see in real time what I'm doing. So here's GeoBra. And what I want to do is I also want to set up the iframe generator, which is going to help me. Iframe generator. If I just search this on Google, it's literally the very first option. So that pulls up this iframe generator that's going to help me to create a code to embed onto Formative. So let's say on GeoBra, I want to incorporate this calculator. All I have to do is take that URL and paste it onto this website where it says iframe URL. Now, don't be discouraged if you're not a techie person like me or a coder. Literally, this does it all for you. So by hitting that generate button, I've just created a code that I can now copy on over to this embed tool. Now, I'm not going to utilize that one. I actually have a different iframe code, but that's just the process by which you can go about creating that code. So I'm going to copy this one because I like this manipulative. So And just so you know, again, if you're not into HTML or coding, no need to panic here. Basically, the only thing that I think is worth mentioning from the code is if you want to adjust the size of this, you're able to do that by adjusting the height and the width here and just kind of playing around with those numbers. I'm not going to do that in this case because I kind of like the size that it's already formatted this. And just so you know, what you're seeing on your end, students are not going to see. They're not going to see this clutter of a code. I'm going to actually show you what a student's going to look at. So I'm going to click on this preview. And notice that that code does not appear on the student end. They just have that manipulative to work with. And so what we're going to do now, speaking about content blocks, is I'm going to attach questions now to this embedded tool. Now, notice you have 2 plus signs. You want to make sure that you stay within the box. So hit on this plus sign, not this one down here, because that'll create a new question separate from that content block. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually continue to add more content. I'm going to add a text box. And this is where I'm going to include instructions for my students. So in the interest of saving us time, I'll go ahead and I'll copy and paste those instructions here. So this is what I'm going to ask my students to do. And now I'll continue to expand on that. I'll hit this plus sign, and maybe I want to incorporate a short answer for them. And so I'm going to ask my students to use that manipulative that they have to the left to answer this question here. So as they're adjusting these points, given the instructions, they have to tell me what this side will be. And so if you want the system to auto grade for you, you will put the answer key. So in this case, that answer is 5. I'll set that here. And I have some options down here. I can make this question required. I can toggle on show your work, but in this case, because they have this manipulative, it might not be needed. In the case of if this were with actual textual answers, you can make it case sensitive to look for capitalization. If you anticipate that a student might answer with an actual typing out the word 5, you can prepare and anticipate for that here. I'm going to set up one more short answer in the same way. Notice I'm staying within the box, not this outer plus sign. And I'm going to set up one more short answer. So this time I'm going to ask my students, similar idea, just practicing one more. And in this case, the answer is 10. So I'm going to show you what this looks like on the student end. I'll preview it as a student and notice that our content block is created so that the questions are matched to that manipulative that is to the left. So notice also how it is grouped at the top. You have this icon telling the student there's that embedded resource. Here's that T for the text box. And here's question 1 and 2 that is linked to that resource. So easy way for students to navigate. And this is essentially how you would go about creating a content block. And the benefit here is that if you're shuffling this within your formatives, those questions that are tied to that content will stay grouped together. So I'm going to close out of this student preview. And next, I want us to talk about a relatively newer functionality that we just added, which is the ability to add sections. So this is a content block, what we just created, and you can also create sections. Now, the benefit of a section is that you can split your assessment into different parts. So this is great for chunking your sections. Maybe you want to provide increasing or decreasing levels of rigor, or maybe you want to create very clear opening not statements, but opening, main, and closing activities for your students to do within a formative. So the way that you would go about setting those up is where you see this little plus sign here. If you click on that, notice that in addition to question and content types, down at the bottom, you have a layout option for adding a section. So you can add a section, and what that'll do is it gives you this title bar up at the top that you can change the title to. So you can call it a warm up, and then you can literally pressing this plus sign will pull up this button, your question types. And so you can add additional questions that kind of correspond with each of those sections. I can add another section here. Let's say I wanted to call this part 1 of the assignment. So you can see how you start to kind of chunk and structure your assessments in that way. And I'll show you the benefit of doing that in just 1 second. But before I do that, I kind of want to switch gears a little bit and just kind of incorporate a little bit of social and emotional learning on here. And so a quick way as teachers to get a pulse for how students are feeling and what they're thinking is by incorporating quick check-ins within Formative. So you can build those in very seamlessly and easily in the following way. So I'm going to actually change this title and I'm going to call it a check-in. And I'm going to actually maintain my show your work. And what I'm going to have students do is I'm just going to ask them point blank, how are you feeling today? So I can incorporate that into my Formative in this way. And notice I have instructions here. I'm going to use the show your work box to add an image. So I'll add an image here. And notice my options. I can add an image in any of these ways, pulling a resource straight from my computer, taking a photo, or doing a Google search right from Formative. But in this case, I actually have a URL of an image that I want to utilize. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that URL on here. And notice what the system does. That pulls up the image that I want to use. I'm going to add it, keep it on the background of my show your work, press on this check mark. And notice what that does. Now it's a quick check-in to get a pulse for how my students are doing as they complete my Formative, which I can then view and review responses in real time, see how my students are feeling. What does this look like on their end? I'll go ahead and I'll show you. I'll hit this preview and notice what this has done. Because I've added sections, now I have a clear heading here with that first question of how my students are doing. So what they would do is they would open up this and they would select these tools to let me know how they're feeling. So a quick check, quick little pulse on how my students are doing with their social and emotional development. And then I can hit this next button, and that would take them to that part 1 that we've labeled, which was that content block that we've grouped together. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to exit out of here. And before we navigate away from that social and emotional learning, just a quick tip. If you actually search our library, if you just type in, I already have it here, social and emotional learning, you'll see that a lot of educators around the country, around the world actually, have already incorporated a lot of different resources. So if there's something, here's a quick check-in. If there's something you see that you like, you can very easily add it to your Formative. Let's say I want to add this. I'll hit add. I'll exit out of here. And notice that check-in is applied to my Formative. And anything that I take from the library, I can always adjust. Say I want to resize, or I want to reformat, or I want to change an image. I can edit anything that I'm pulling from the library. So just a little note about social and emotional learning. So that all being said, I'm going to preview once again. Here are those 2 social and emotional learning questions with that check-in. And notice again, because I created those headings, students would have to hit this next to kind of navigate. And there's that content block. So the other piece of our agenda today is about lesson delivery through teacher-paced mode. So for that, I'm going to actually switch on over to this Formative here. Let it load. This one has a few more questions, so it lends itself to teacher-paced mode. Now, teacher-paced mode, if you haven't utilized it, is a tool that you have for lesson delivery. I recommend in real time in the classroom because it allows you to control the pace of instruction. So as students are completing a lesson or an assignment, you're literally clicking to control the pace by which students are navigating and moving from questions. Students can't move ahead. They have to go with your pace. So it's a great tool for you to really guide and guide their thinking, check for understanding, and identify, again, viewing the responses, identifying which students are struggling with concepts so that you can then identify your intervention and enrichment opportunities. And so I'm going to show you how to set that up using this example. As you can see, this example has sections that we've included. And some of these sections also have content blocks within them. So again, the content block benefit here is that the questions are grouped together with the content. In this case, it's an image, not an embedded tool. And so I'm going to go ahead and go to my assigned settings in order to toggle on the teacher pace mode. In my case, I'm going to assign it to guest students. And Casey, I'm going to volunteer you to log in on the back end as a guest student so that the participants that are connected here today can see what is happening with the view responses as the teacher is navigating. So I'm selecting guest students in my case. If you want to try this with your students, as you're getting ready to assign, all you have to do is toggle on teacher pace mode here. Right now it's turned off. So I'm going to toggle on teacher pace mode. You see it's activated green, and then I'll hit assign. And once I do that, notice it opens up 2 tabs. So one tab is mine. And Casey, as I'm explaining this, go ahead and put in this code. And what you're noticing on this screen is this is where I'm going to control the pace of instruction. Notice I have not started the formative, but it also pulls up this window, which is where all of the student responses are going to come in real time. So if you're in the classroom, maybe something that you can do is project this, because you can always keep names confidential. Maybe you want to do student error analysis in real time with students. Notice Casey's in here. I can always toggle this on to hide the names and keep this kind of confidential so that I can have this projected in real time and then see in real time those bubbles coming in with red and green indicating where students are struggling and on which questions. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to control that pace of instruction here. I'm going to press start. And notice how I can control. So because of the sections and because I've grouped questions within content blocks, I can actually navigate and I can skip ahead. Casey can't. Casey is locked into the screen. But when I hit next, Casey's screen is now seeing this point of view. And I'm literally as a teacher controlling the pace by which my students are seeing these screens. And if I need to jump ahead, maybe this is a lesson that I'm doing in real time and I need to preview something or jump forwards and backwards, I'm able to do that by clicking on here. So when I do this, Casey's screen is changing in real time to match where I am. So this is how you can control the pace of instruction. Think of how, when we think of gradual release of instruction, think of how this could be a powerful tool, because in real time, I'm going to give Casey a chance to kind of answer these. And Casey, you could just put whatever, just so that the audience sees in real time these bubbles. And I'm going to refresh. I have notice, and I see that somebody else joined. Thank you for the participation here. So notice that they're answering these questions. The bubbles are coming in. These are not auto-graded. If they were auto-graded, if I had set an answer key, you would actually see, this match to either green or red or whatever my color threshold is for my proficiency. So at a glance, I could see which students are struggling. In this case, like I said, they're not auto-graded. I'm going to skip on over to 3 and 4 and give those of you that are connected an opportunity to kind of just put whatever on question 3, 4, and 5. And then notice once again what happens here. And these are auto-graded. So at a glance, notice how as a teacher, I could identify which students are struggling, where I might want to intervene. And just when you think that some students are ready to maybe independently complete this, an option you have within teacher pace mode is if you go to this end session, this drop-down button will allow you 3 different options. You can close the assignment altogether. Maybe you've decided, stop. We're not understanding this. Let's reboot. Let's start over. You can force submission, or you might decide, okay, I know who I'm going to identify. I know who is ready for enrichment. I know who's ready for intervention. And this particular group is going to stay and work independently. You can switch it back to student pace mode, which would give that control back to the students to complete that assessment independently. And that frees you up so that you can work on those students in real time that need your help the most. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm switching back to student pace mode. And if you were logged in, notice how now you can navigate freely in that assessment. And so that's a little bit about teacher pace mode and the advantages of how that can support your lesson delivery and engagement with students. And I have one final stop before concluding here today. So for that, I'm going to go on over to my slides. And within your dashboard, just kind of want to point you in the direction of where you can go if you need additional help and resources. So on your dashboard to the right on the top, where you see maybe you have a picture or just initials for your abbreviation or your name and last name, To the left, there's a question mark that if you hit that question mark, it'll kind of give you all of these options. So if you run into any issues, you need to contact Formative support, there's a button to do that. And there's also a button that'll take you straight to our training center. And what you can do on the training center is you can sign up for future webinars or view previously recorded webinars. Like this one should be available in about a week. You can also hit this Help Center button, which will take you to a place where you can access articles about, say you're curious about rubrics and how those work. You can type in the word rubric on here, and any article that we have on rubrics will pop up. Frequently asked questions, tips and tricks. So lots of resources to really support you with your formative practice to really level up every single day. So that all being said, I've just about covered all of the items on our agenda today. I'm happy to stick around and answer any questions. I do thank everyone here for joining, connecting. Hopefully you found this session short, sweet, and to the point and useful, and you're ready to implement something into your everyday practice. I want to be mindful of everyone's time here that is connected. So again, this webinar will be recorded and posted on our training center. We do thank you all for connecting, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.